Well, happy first Friday and welcome to another episode of Bridges Conversations. My name is Steve Givens. I'm the executive director of the Bridges Foundation in St. Louis. We are a small nonprofit organization run by lay people that we offer the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola in everyday life and have been doing so for more than 30 years now. So these conversations are a chance for us to talk to members of our community, those who have either been through our exercises or who help us in carrying them out in one way or the other, or who are related to the work of Ignatian spirituality in some way. And that our guest today is probably best described by all of those things. This is Tom Auffenberg we're talking with today. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Steve.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on today.
You're welcome. So we're talking to Tom today for a number of reasons, but mainly, I guess, because Tom took his experience of the spiritual exercises and out of that created a new program called the Next Chapter program, which we're going to be talking about. That is it. The Next Chapter program is a 6-month guided journey that is grounded in Ignatian spirituality, and it's specifically for people who are approaching or who've just recently entered into retirement. So using Ignatian spirituality and discernment, this program helps people decide what they might do with that next part of their life. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit of about Tom before we start. Tom retired in just a few years ago in 2016 after a long and varied career in teaching and law, financial planning, and 25 years as a business owner. He owned a printing company here in St. Louis. So he brings a lot and some varied backgrounds into everything that he does and does so well. And today we're going to be talking about that a little bit. We have a few of you who are watching us live. And if you have questions for Tom as we go, please feel free to drop them into the comments section right there on Facebook. And we'll get to those questions either along the way or a little bit later. Look, there's one already. What the heck? Let's see. This is Antoinette Serena just saying hello to us. Thank you, Antoinette. So, Tom, let's begin with, as we always do here, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where and how you were raised, and I guess that leading into how you became familiar with Ignatian spirituality and experienced the spiritual exercises. So let's start with that big, wide open question.
Okay. Well, I grew up in St. Louis. Pretty much I did spend my first 18 years here. I'm from a family, I had 4 siblings. My dad was a native St. Louisan as well, so a lot of years in St. Louis. After high school, which I went to Chaminade, which, by the way, isn't Ignatian, I went to a Jesuit university, Santa Clara University, near San Jose, California. And I would say that was kind of my first exposure to the Jesuits. Some exposure to Ignatian spirituality then, but I really got probably more involved in learning about it. I taught high school for 3 years at 2 different Jesuit high schools, one in Sacramento and DeSmet here in St. Louis, and got to know a lot of Jesuits and got a fair amount of exposure to Ignatian spirituality there. But I would say when it really, really kind of began for me is when I started making retreats at the White House. And it's hard for me to believe that was my first one was 1987, and that's like 35 years ago. It doesn't seem that long.
And for those of you not in St. Louis, the White House is not that place on Pennsylvania Avenue in D.C., but rather a retreat house run by the Jesuits here in the Central Province. So right. A beautiful place with a long history. Thank you.
It is a beautiful place. It sits right on the bluffs of the Mississippi River. Great place to to make a retreat. So anyway, I think you asked that's kind of when I started getting involved in Ignatian spirituality. And I would say I was pretty consistent making those retreats and was pretty involved in one way or another in Ignatian spirituality from there on. And, but it was 2000 when I actually made what is known as the spiritual exercises in a 9-month format, as opposed to a 30-day format that the Jesuits make it. And it was after that I got exposed to Bridges, because they have a training program for training people to offer the exercises. And I participated in that and was involved in leading the exercises for a while. So I got to say, I had 3 sons that went to St. Louis U High, and that was also, there's a lot of Jesuits there, and that was also an exposure to Ignatian spirituality for me that was important.
Yeah. And that your experience of the spiritual exercises, and there's a number of ways for people to do this if this is new to you. One is through working through an organization like Bridges, and we offer this kind of in a community setting, small group of people who are going through it the same time you are, all along with that one-on-one guidance of someone who's instructed in doing this. So your first experience was purely an experience of doing that one-on-one with a Jesuit priest. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Wow. I didn't even know the spiritual exercises were an opportunity until shortly before I made them. And a Jesuit friend of mine recommended that I try it, and he recommended a Jesuit, Father Rich Buehler, who was the director at the White House then. So I made them that way, and it was only after that I got familiar with the Bridges program.
All right. And now you and your wife Dale are continue both to be involved in Bridges. We have a kind of a post-retreat program we call the Magis program, where we offer ongoing spiritual formation. And you and Dale have taught some of the small group courses that we offer on a 9-month basis also.
Yeah, that's right. And I very much enjoyed that. Co-teaching them. We've taught one on discernment and another one on Ignatian prayer styles.
All right. That's great. Well, listen, let's jump ahead a little bit. Coming out of your own business career and thinking about what is it that I do next, and then ending up by creating this program to help people do that. Can you talk a little bit about that journey and why you think this program is needed?
Sure. Yeah, I was probably about 5 years away from retirement, and I learned about a program that was geared to helping people make that transition. And I decided to participate in it, and it was a very valuable experience. And during that time, I kind of thought, I think this is something I'd like to do once I retire, is be involved in a program like this. And the one I participated in wasn't grounded in Ignatian spirituality, and I thought Ignatian spirituality would be an ideal tool for the program. So
why is that, do you think? What is it?
Well, I think we're in an age where we're inundated with information, where choices are more challenging than ever, where really discerning God's voice in your life is from all the multitude of voices, including your own, is a challenge. And I think that, Ignatian spirituality's emphasis on the examen prayer and daily prayer, as well as its emphasis on discernment. And what discernment is really all about, most of the people that are involved in our program, they can think of 2 or 3 or 4 possible options of things they might engage in or whatever in their next chapter. But you have to have a process for narrowing it down to 1 or 2 or 1, depending on your situation. And I think the daily prayer opens their ears and gets them noticing things that they otherwise might notice. And I think the actual discernment process, once they get knowledgeable of it and get a chance to practice a bit, is a great tool for helping them make some of the key decisions they have to make with respect to that next chapter of life. So it's the best way of making decisions. Let's say this, it's the best way of making decisions I know of.
Right. And while your program isn't doing the spiritual exercises, it certainly is informed by all that, correct?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And there's a lot of other key concepts that one would be exposed to if they made the exercises that come into play. But when people ask me what the emphasis is, I usually say it's Ignatian prayer and Ignatian discernment. Those are kind of the key emphases in the Next Chapter program.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of this is, we all go through our professional lives and we develop a set of tools and we develop a knowledge base and we discover maybe some passions. But we may or may not have a sense as we enter into this new stage of our life of what our human strengths are, what our spiritual gifts are. So how do we help people go about doing that?
Well, in our program, it's a variety of ways. I mean, there's a number of reflection questions that attempt to draw that out. There's a number of prayer exercises that attempt to draw that out to give people a better awareness of who they are and their strengths and weaknesses. But we actually also engage with 2 assessments, and one's is really focused on human strengths and the other's focused on spiritual gifts. So we really are trying to help people gain a greater self-awareness for entering that next chapter. Because ideally, if they're using their gifts, they're going to experience the most joy and be the most effective in that next chapter of life.
Yeah.
In any chapter, really.
Right. So what's the program look like? It's a 9-month program, but how often do you meet and what takes place and how large are the groups, and just kind of give people a general overview?
Yeah, well, we'll start with the groups. The first 3 years, we averaged about 35 people, and we'd split those between 2 groups. I think the ideal size for one of our groups is about 18. Much bigger than that, it gets to be too much. So if we get more than the 18, we are always looking to split into 2 groups. The program, it's not quite 9 months. It's 7 sessions that take place a month apart. And then we have a kind of a celebratory dinner at the end, which usually trails the program by a couple months. So you could call it 9. The sessions are once a month. They are 4-hour sessions. One of the sessions is longer. It's a retreat. It's an overnight retreat after the 4th session. There's usually about anywhere from 5 to 7 hours of work to be done between sessions, but keep in mind you have a month to do it. We start in October and we end in April, and then the dinner is somewhere after that. And as we travel through there, as I said, there's different emphases, but one is definitely a number of tools that increase people's self-knowledge. Another is really grounding them in Ignatian prayer and in Ignatian discernment. We'd like to expose them to a lot of possible options for activities. And I think one of the key things, and the people who are attracted to this, I think really like the fact that they actually leave the program with a written plan. It isn't all up in the air. They've got a written plan where they're addressing the key issues, of their next chapter. And then they form, or the program can continue beyond, is usually we real strongly encourage they form kind of what we call an implementation group, but it's a group of people in the program. It's usually 2 or 3. They break out in smaller groups, and they just stay in touch once a month and encourage one another, come up, brainstorm with one another, bounce ideas off one another, and kind of hold one another accountable a little bit. So, and those groups can sometimes they go a long, long time. Otherwise, they may go, for 6 months or a year. It just depends on the individuals involved. So that's
You know,
kind
this,
of a look at it.
yeah.
And now we're hosting those meetings at Mercy Retreat Center because they've got the space there that at the times we need, and it's a great location.
I would assume that, we think of this as a pretty personal decision to make, but I would assume that making that with a group of people opens up some other opportunities. Even, you might hear things from someone else that you didn't think of. Do you find that's true?
Definitely. I would
Yeah.
say we have people evaluate the program when they're done, and we always hear how big a part they thought the group input was to it. I would say my strong bias is making this journey is a lot easier in a group of similarly situated people than it is solo. And they don't only learn things from one another, get insights and whatever, and learn about things from one another, but they form a pretty supportive community that's very helpful when you're journeying like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I put this up out. If you want more information on the program, it's www next chapter program. And I know you told me that word is very important because there's some other next chapters out there. So it's nextchapterprogram.org if you want more information. There's a few people watching, and if you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the comments. Someone asked a question about the Bridges program, which I will answer near the end when we're done talking about Tom, so we can get the questions to Tom first. But I will answer that question for you, Bill. So what do you think it is about this, this 16th century spirituality from Spain that, brought about the creation of the Society of Jesus and Jesuits and institutions all over the world? But that's a long time ago. So what do you think it is about this spirituality that makes it so practical and useful and alive, all these years later?
Well, I think Ignatius was well ahead of his time in his psychological insights and spiritual insights into people, and I really do think that he put a big emphasis on getting in touch with our desires, probably before anyone else. Desires at that time could be viewed as maybe leading one astray, and how important it is to get in touch with those desires because God put them in there for us. And if we can get in touch with them and live them, that's what's going to lead us to the happiest life, I think. So I think it really had to do with his insights. And in reality, in our case, the discernment tool is that he came up with is just just very appropriate, and I think ahead of his time in terms of that manner of decision making. But I think it's particularly helpful now because, as I said earlier, there's just so many competing influences and voices, and distinguishing gods from the others is not easy. And I think that's where Ignatian spirituality really is a helpful tool.
Yeah, this idea of distinguishing the source of the voice, so to speak. I think I have this desire to do something, but is that God's voice or is that your own? That's a life's work, right? But
right.
Can you talk just a little bit about some of these tools and especially in regard to the next chapter? What do I do in retirement? How do we begin to sense if something is God's voice or if it's our own?
Well, we have a text written by a Jesuit by the name of Mark Thibodeau, which I believe is one of the best written, and it's definitely one of the most user-friendly. He has this great gift of being able to take pretty complex subjects and make them simple, and he's very good at providing examples and whatever. But But I think you know, in that book, he kind of outlines one approach to really trying to get in touch with God's voice through our desires. And that's a process he calls prey dreaming, where you have two or three options you're choosing between, and you do your homework, you research them and whatever, but then you kind of prey dream them out to their not being practical, but just the most perfect conclusion each option could lead to, or the best conclusion each could option. And you sit with that, and you ponder it, and you get, it's all about getting to a sense of peace and joy and comfort with it. I will say, there's no absolute certainty on whether you've heard God's voice, but I think I call it spiritual intuition, that intuition of whether it's from God or and one of the most competing voices is the one from you, not so much the world. The world has all kinds of them too, but you get more and more of a comfort level by getting in touch with those feelings of joy and peace, and that, I think you, as I say, get a sense that this is from God. This isn't just me coming up with something that I think I'd like to do or whatever.
Yeah. I think we got to watch. We're coming close to the end of our time here. I'm going to put this, answer this question from Bill Lehman, and I'll take a shot at it. But Tom, feel free to jump in if you have a addition. So Bill Lehman asks, can you compare and contrast the traditional Bridges program, the 7-month program? Is it the? Oh, I see what he's saying. Never mind. I think he's saying here, can we contrast the Next Chapter program with the traditional Bridges program? So it's not the same program with some additional stuff added on. It's more of a specialized program that draws from some of the tools that we learned during the spiritual exercises. So yeah.
And I'd say that the Bridges program can be for anybody. I mean, you could be 22, you could be 88. It runs the gamut, and it goes more in depth into the Ignatian spirituality. My program is more tailored for somebody who tends to be in a particular circumstance in their life, at least at this time, a transition. Right. I think my program can work well for any transition, but the transition that we focus on is that retirement transition.
Right. Yeah. And Bill says here he's been through the program, I guess the Bridges program, and has also done about 20 White House retreats. So, and he tells me in a additional comment here that he's 61 and contemplating retirement. So I think this, for anyone who's contemplating that, whether they have this history with Ignatian spirituality or not, this would be a good way to kind of really focus in on one aspect of that, which is making a decision about next steps. Does that sound right, Tom?
Yeah. I would say to Bill, if it's one of his main concerns at this time in his life is that what that next chapter is going to look like, we would probably focus a lot more attention on that particular issue than the spiritual exercises would. Not that you couldn't address it through the spiritual exercises, but right. You're not likely to be in a group of people facing the same concern, and you're not likely to have it as focused on that next chapter and writing a plan to live it out, etc.
And also, unlike the experience of the full spiritual exercises to a place like Bridges, there's that daily commitment to prayer and weekly meetings, and so it's a lot more going on. And I think the Next Chapter program, while it would certainly encourage that daily prayer, you're not making your way through the exercises in the same way. So
yeah.
Well, listen, let me see if there's one more question here that just popped up. Let's see what it is. All right. Oh, well, that's a good question, Bill. So he says, I'm not sure there's a right answer to this. Bill says he hasn't done bridges yet, but would like to. Assuming if he were to do both of these programs, which order would you recommend? That's a great question. I don't know. Tom, what do you think about that?
I've been asked that question. I think you could go in either order. I've had people that have completed the Next Chapter program and gone on to bridges, and vice versa. It probably, I would say it probably depends on how close it is to that retirement time, how much you're wanting to really focus on what your next chapter is going to look like. And if that was somewhat urgent or somewhat soon, I might suggest the Next Chapter program first. If it's 5-6 years off or 4 years off and you're not feeling that urgent, I might say, the Bridges program, it wouldn't matter, but the Bridges program might be a good place to start.
Yeah. Tom and I were talking about this the other day, and that there's several organizations in the St. Louis area that work really closely together, and we're never in competition because we all think what the others are doing is great. And in addition to what Tom does, there's an organization called the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, which takes people once they retire and place them in volunteer roles in the community. In addition to giving them an opportunity to get together as a community, discuss the work that they're doing, that sort of thing. And we all kind of recommend each other's programs to each other. So, yeah. Well, listen, we are about out of time here, but thank you for the question, Bill. That was some good areas to spend some time with. Just one more time here. If you want information on the Bridges program, visit our website at bridgesfoundation.org. You'll see my phone number on that website. If you want to talk, please reach out to me. And then for the Next Chapter program, it's www.nextchapterprogram.org. And I assume they can reach you through that website, Tom?
Yeah, my email address is on there. Oh.
All right. Next month, we'll be here on, it doesn't say April 1st, but it will be April 1st. The next episode's on Friday, April 1st at noon. And joining me in conversation will be Tom's much, much, much better half, Dale Auffenberg. And Dale will be talking about her journey into Bridges and from Bridges into becoming a prayer companion, and a little bit about what is the role of a prayer companion as people go through the spiritual exercises. So that'll be a good, interesting way to do that. Real quick here, Antoinette says she did Next Chapter in 17-18 with you, I guess. And Bridges is on her bucket retirement list. Well, that's wonderful. We'd love to have you. And Bill asked, when's the next Bridges start? We start every September. So we go September through May. So, all right. Well, thanks. We're going to end this here and move on. Thank you all for tuning in. Tom, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Thanks to the audience as well. I appreciate the opportunity to tell people about the program.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. We will see you next time on Friday, April 1st. All right. Until then, be well. Thanks.
Okay.